In a city renowned for its luxurious establishments, Le Marquis was much more than just a restaurant. It was an institution. Nestled in the heart of the most prestigious district, it stood as a sanctuary of refinement and culinary excellence. With its elegant cut stone facade and solid wood doors adorned with gilded handles, everything here evoked prestige and exclusivity. As soon as a customer walked through the entrance, they were enveloped in a cozy atmosphere, where the murmur of conversations mingled with the delicate clinking of silver cutlery.
Majestic crystals chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting sparkles of light onto the immaculate tablecloths.
The tables, perfectly set, displayed refined floral arrangements, and the flickering candles diffused a subdued light, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and grandiose. The staff, dressed in crisp uniforms, starched white shirts, fitted black vests and silk ties, moved with choreographed precision, ensuring every detail was perfect. The service was legendary, designed to satisfy the slightest whims of a clientele made up of influential businessmen, entertainment personalities, and political figures. That evening, the room was almost full. A group of diplomats chatted in hushed tones in a reserved corner, while a famous model sipped a glass of wine in the company of a renowned director. Everything exuded luxury and exclusivity. Then, a man walked through the door of the restaurant. He entered quietly, without pretension, as if he were a simple passerby looking for a place to dine. He wore a lightly worn jeans, a simple black shirt, and a long dark wool coat, slightly creased, contrasting with the dazzling elegance of the usual customers. His hair, slightly disheveled, fell to his shoulders, and a carefully maintained beard framed his serene face. He had no bodyguards or assistants, no outward signs of wealth. Without attracting attention, he slowly crossed the room, casting a discreet look around him. He seemed at ease, but also detached from the surrounding splendor. Arriving near the large bay window, he chose a table from which we could admire the illuminated city, the skyscrapers sparkling in the night. He sat down, gently placing his hands on the table, and calmly observed the hustle and bustle outside, as if the tumult of the world did not affect him. This man was Keanu Reeves. But no one seemed to recognize him. Starting with Antoine, one of the servers. Antoine was a man of 30 years old, thin, with an angular face, who had worked at the Marquis for several years. He was proud of his position, not because of his passion for service, but because of the feeling of superiority he got from it. Serving billionaires and celebrities gave him the illusion of belonging to their world. He particularly enjoyed observing customers and judging those who, in his opinion, did not deserve to be here. Seeing this stranger settling in without the arrogant attitude of wealthy clients, without showing ostentatious signs of wealth, he immediately classified him in the category of impostors.
An intruder.
Perhaps a dreamer who just wanted to breathe a little of the inaccessible luxury of this place. Antoine's features tightened slightly. It wasn't the first time he'd seen this type of customer. Men who came into this restaurant without the means, hoping to have an experience beyond their reach. Without hiding his contempt, he approached with a forced smile, his tone marked with false politeness. "Sir, are you sure you have chosen the right place?"
"Here, we serve a demanding clientele."
He paused, waiting for the man to feel embarrassed, to stand up and mutter an apology. But the stranger remained impassive. Keanu slowly looked up at him, his calm, inscrutable gaze meeting that of the waiter. There was no anger or irritation in his expression, only imperturbable calm. In a calm voice, he simply replied, "I would like to see the menu, please." Antoine sighed deeply, showing his exasperation without trying to hide it. For him, this client had no importance. He was convinced that this man was only playing a role, trying to impress with feigned manners when he clearly could not afford a dinner at an establishment like the Marquis. Without bothering to adopt the usual delicacy reserved for wealthy customers, he threw the menu on the table with a casual gesture, like throwing a bone to a stray dog. The leather of the menu slid slightly on the tablecloth before stopping in front of Keanu. "But of course, don't be surprised by the prices, eh?" he added with barely concealed mockery, a smirk at the corner of his lips. He expected a reaction, a raised eyebrow, an embarrassed grin, a hesitation. But Keanu didn't flinch. He remained calm, almost too calm, which irritated Antoine even more. The man took his time to consult the map, as if he were perfectly at ease in this world of luxury. Antoine, standing a few meters away, observed the scene, arms crossed, impatient. "Hurry up and realize you have nothing to do here," he thought with contempt. Then, after a long silence, Keanu gently raised his hand to call the waiter. Antoine rolled his eyes, annoyed. What will this one bring out? He approached reluctantly, looking skeptical, as if expecting to hear a ridiculous order or an embarrassing question about the price of the dishes. "I'll have the tasting menu," Keanu announced in a calm voice, "with a bottle of your best red wine." A silence fell between them. Antoine, incredulous, blinked several times before letting out a mocking sneer. "Are you sure?" he said, crossing his arms. "This wine costs more than some cars." He expected to see the stranger stammer, hesitate, perhaps retract under the pretext of a joke. But Keanu did not lose his calm. He simply looked up at Antoine and replied with a slight smile. "And yet, I'll take it." There was something strangely confident in his voice. No trace of arrogance, no provocation, just quiet confidence. Antoine scrutinized him, trying to understand what was escaping him. He's bluffing, he convinced himself. He just wants to be smart. Still amused by what he took to be misplaced arrogance, he shrugged his shoulders and turned around, heading towards the kitchens. As he crossed the room, he muttered under his breath, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "We're going to have a good laugh when his card is refused." He had no idea who was sitting at that table. Antoine continued to pace the room with a nonchalance tinged with arrogance, convinced that he had uncovered an impostor. He was far from suspecting that several employees had noticed his contemptuous behavior towards this discreet customer. Among them, Juliet, an experienced waitress, who looked at him with an expression half exasperated, half worried. No longer able to ignore his inappropriate attitude, she approached him, lowering her voice slightly so as not to attract attention. "Do you know who it is?" she whispered, trying to hide her agitation. Antoine raised an eyebrow, surprised by his question. He glanced over at the man in worn jeans, who was patiently waiting for his meal without the slightest sign of worry. "A penniless guy who wants to play rich." "For what?" he replied with a mocking sneer. But Antoine's laughter died down when he saw Juliet's expression. She seemed shocked, almost panicked. "Antoine, this guy is Keanu Reeves." A heavy silence settled between them. Antoine blinked, then burst out laughing, as if she had just told him the joke of the century. "Are you kidding? Keanu Reeves would never come here alone, dressed like that." He shook his head, amused by the absurdity of the idea. For him, it was unimaginable that a celebrity of this stature shows up in a luxury restaurant without an escort of bodyguards, without an elegant outfit, without the slightest pretension. But at this precise moment, a sudden commotion shook the restaurant staff. An imposing figure burst into the room, advancing with rapid and determined steps, the restaurant manager himself. His face was tense, his smile tight, and his eyes scanned the room as if looking for someone. Antoine observed the scene with perplexity. He didn't have never seen his superior move with such urgency. Then, in front of the intrigued looks of customers and servers, the director stopped short in front of Keanu Reeves' table. In a respectful gesture, he bowed slightly and displayed a polite smile, despite his obvious agitation. "Mr. Reeves, what a surprise to see you here," he exclaimed in a warm voice. "We are honored by your visit. Is everything to your liking?" An icy silence fell over the room.
Antoine sentit his heart stops dead.
A wave of panic passed through him, and his face instantly fell. His hands became sweaty, his breathing quickened. Keanu Reeves. He felt her legs buckling under the weight of the revelation. Meanwhile, Keanu, still calm, took the time to put down his glass before responding in a calm but firm voice. "I am well established, but I have noticed that some employees do not treat all customers with the same respect." His tone was neutral, with no apparent anger, but his words resonated like an irrevocable sentence. Antoine felt his blood run cold. He was coming to insult and disdain the owner of the restaurant. And now he paid the price. The director immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. His gaze hardens, and he slowly turned his head towards Antoine, whose face was livid. The waiter, until then arrogant and self-confident, did not dare move more. He felt the weight of all eyes focused on him, those of his colleagues, of a few customers who had sensed the tension, and above all, that of Keanu Reeves. A cold sweat ran down the back of his neck. His arrogance was gone. I'm really sorry, sir, I didn't know, he stammered, his voice trembling with a panic that he no longer even tried to hide. Keanu slowly placed his glass on the table, without taking your eyes off him. He didn't seem angry or upset, but his absolute calm made the scene even heavier, more overwhelming. Then, after a silence that seemed to last an eternity, he replied, in a calm but sharp voice, "That's the problem." A simple sentence, and yet it resonated in the room like a hammer blow. The air became heavier.
No one dared to speak.
Only the muffled sounds of the restaurant room persisted in the background, the discreet clinking of cutlery, the distant murmur of conversations, but in the immediate space around Keanu, the silence was deafening. Keanu the lice away a few seconds before continuing. You should never judge a client by their appearance. A server must be professional with everyone, no matter his outfit, his attitude or his apparent wealth. He fixed his piercing gaze on Antoine, who, unable to bear this confrontation, lowered his head. Today it was me. But how many other customers have you disrespected for no reason? Antoine opened his mouth, looking for an excuse, but no words came. Because he knew, deep down, that Keanu was right. He had done it dozens of times. He had judged, scorned, sneered, refused to serve with the same care those who did not correspond to his image of the ideal clientele. The director, aware that he could not allow such behavior to pass, crossed his arms and took a heavy breath. Then, without detour, he turned to Antoine and declared, in a tone cold and relentless, "I believe we no longer need your services, Antoine." The server blemish. His stomach twisted with sudden panic. "Sir, he tried, desperate for a second chance. "You can leave," the director cut in sharply, without the slightest hesitation. His tone was clear.
Antoine scented the world crumbling beneath his feet.
It wasn't just a job he was losing. It was a position, status, prestige. He who boasted so much of working in this luxurious establishment, he found himself humiliated and fired before everyone's eyes. Other employees looked at him in silence. Some seemed almost relieved to see justice be done. Others simply understood a lesson. His throat tight, unable to respond, Antoine took a deep breath, then turned away and left the restaurant, head bowed, crushed by his own arrogance. Keanu, meanwhile, showed no signs of triumph. He did not come to punish, but to teach. After this incident, he finished his meal peacefully, as if nothing had happened. But when he got up to leave, he slipped a generous tip to the waiters who had managed to remain professional, like Juliet, who had recognized him and kept calm. Then, before walking through the door, he stopped one last time and addressed the entire remaining team. His tone was calm, but carrying of a universal truth. Always treat people with respect. It's not their outfit that defines their worth. And without another word, he left the restaurant, leaving behind an unforgettable lesson.